Hi there. Welcome to Business Leadership Podcast. In this podcast, I interview successful business leaders and industry experts to help you grow your business. I truly believe that sometimes a single insight can completely change your business directions and allow you to achieve your business goals. In this episode, I interviewed Eddie LeMoine. Eddie is a best-selling author. He's an international keynote speaker and a thought leader. Eddie specializes in leadership, employee engagement, and a psychology of success. He's the author of Bring About What You Think About. Eddie and I, we went over a variety of different topics. We had a discussion on many different items that impact the business leadership. But I think you're really going to enjoy my discussion with him when he talks about the impact of recent disruption on both workplace and a talent pool. Shortages exist on both sides of the borders in the US and Canada. So Eddie talks about what can business leaders do if they're trying to scale their companies during this shortage of talent pool. What can business leaders do? Also share his tips, how to retain a talent. And also, if you're looking to scale up your team, what business leaders can do to scale up the team, what the talent is required, whether it's locally or nationally or internationally, what can companies do to acquire some of this talent? So if you'd like this content, don't forget to send us your feedback, like and subscribe. Until next time, enjoy. Hi guys, welcome to Business Leadership Podcast. Today my guest is Eddie. Eddie LeMoine is how you pronounce your last name, right?
Yes, that's right. LeMoine. Yeah.
Thank you. This is the topic we have, Eddie. We're talking about leadership. I think this is a very critical time for a lot of leaders to make decisions. Everybody's trying to pivot their business, what they have to do, after COVID. So I'm looking forward to learning from you, looking forward to a discussion. Thank you so much for time.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I'm glad to be here.
So thank you. So where you see that, some of those challenges that for leaders, what they're struggling, Eddie, from your thoughts, what have you been dealing with?
Well, it's interesting. If you look at big disruptors that happen in the workplace, lots of times you can see them coming, but until you're in the middle of it, people don't seem to want to do something about it. Mm-hmm. Or if you're on, kind of profitability cycles or something like that, you don't tend to do something about it. But let me kind of share with you a little bit on how we got to where we are now. So I think everyone really gets a good understanding of why we're feeling what we're feeling, and maybe get rid of some of the myths that people are talking about out there, that, we have this big, great resignation and people just sitting at home waiting to go back to work. Yeah. There is a term called a great resignation. And what that really means is that people quit their job and they sit in the sidelines and they may or may not go back into the workforce. And we've actually experienced that in the United States. There's probably, they suspect there's about 1 million people that are sitting in the sidelines in the US that quit during the pandemic, and they're just sitting home, reevaluating themselves. Do I want to work? Do I want to wait for something else, or want to change my careers? In Canada, though people are loosely saying we have a great resignation, we actually don't. We don't have people sitting in the sidelines waiting to come back for work. We don't have people sitting home. We have movement. A lot of people moving from kind of one job to the other, but we don't. And you might think that's a good thing, but it's actually not, because if we did have a great resignation, it means that we have a pool of resources that are available to work. We just got to entice them to come back into the workplace, and that's not the case at all. Mm-hmm. So when I obviously present on this topic, it's one of my more popular ones, and when I look at the way I present, I always tell an audience the first thing I want to do, and this is a technical term from my mother in Eastern Canada, I want to scare the bejeebers out of you. And the reason why I want to do that is I think it's important for people to understand why we are where we are. And then, I like to give people tools, things they can think about to be able to get out the other side. So if you'll indulge me for a little bit, mm-hmm. I'll share with you why we are where we are right now, and kind of get rid of the myths that are out there. Sure. So, over the last number of years, the aging population was a very predictable thing, but, being predictable and doing something about it doesn't always necessarily mean the same thing. So we kind of knew that the baby boomers were kind of going along their careers and mm-hmm. heading toward, their retirement. So we get up to about where we are right now. And the population between the ages of 55 and 65 has increased by 73%. The population above the age of 65 has increased by 53%. Well, there are people that are exiting the workforce right now. So here's what has happened since the beginning of the pandemic to where we are right now. At the beginning of the pandemic, we were seeing about 8,500 Canadians exit the workforce every single week through retirement.
Mm-hmm.
So, we're looking at about 450,000 baby boomers hitting that retirement age. Now, there's something different about baby boomers hitting retirement and even people entering the workforce age or immigrants moving into Canada. So I want to kind of explain the difference. In Canada, if you're 65 years old and you're hitting retirement age, there's a very good chance you're working. So you're gainfully employed and you're contributing toward the workforce. And that doesn't matter whether you're male or female. Right now in Canada, about 54% of the workforce are female and 46% are male. We actually have more female managers in Canada now than men. So we're both fully employed in the workforce.
Yeah.
So 65 years old, they start to head up into their retirement. Since the beginning of the pandemic, we have probably lost 900,000 baby boomers out of the workforce. Now, the number's probably even worse than that because there were baby boomers that were sitting on the edge saying, I'm going to keep working for a while. But then all of a sudden they go, the whole working from home, the fear of the pandemic, all of those things. We've seen people exit a little earlier. So we don't know what the real number is. But, we're pushing 900,000 to 1 million baby boomers alone that left the workforce. And then if you go back to the beginning of the pandemic in 2020, we had about 185,000 immigrants move into Canada when we should have had 341,000 move into Canada. So, a lot less immigration in that first year. But the number that people don't talk about is about 190,000 people actually exited the country to go back to be with their families during the pandemic. So the net number was more like, negative 5,000 people in the first year of the pandemic. The second year of the pandemic, the numbers will tell you about 400,000 immigrants moved into Canada, but the reality is 200,000 of them were already on the ground and we just changed the status. So we added a couple 100,000 people. Yeah. So for us to get back to the immigration numbers will still take a few years, but every immigrant who moves into Canada isn't necessarily working. I work with a lot of companies that recruit people from all over the world. So they may bring a mechanical engineer in to work in their company. And with them, they'll bring their spouse and say 2 or 3 children under the age of 15. Now, in the long term, that's of great benefit because those children will finish their education here and work and go into the workforce. So it works out well. But in the short term, if you were trying to replace a baby boomer with an immigrant, number for number, you got baby boomers that are probably working when they hit 65 and immigrants that maybe 1 in 3 are working when they enter the country. So you'd need the immigration number to be significantly larger than it currently is. But the more people you bring into the country, it creates another problem. And we're seeing that in the housing market right now. And a lot of that it's always the baby boomers' fault. The baby boomers, all the things that they predicted they would do, they didn't do. So people predict that they would move out of their houses and move into condos, and they did a few years ago. But then they didn't like that, and they moved back to the houses again. Yeah. So the baby boomers are living too long, and they're staying in their homes too long. So now when people come into the country, it's difficult for them to find a place to live. So all of that is creating pressure. That would be fine if it was just us. But all the G7 countries are facing this exact same problem. So right now in Canada, and this is part of the scare the bejeebers out of your part, but right now in Canada, we have about 1 million unfilled jobs, which really means that there's 1 million vacancies out there that we don't have people to put in those vacancies. And that number would be scary, which it is, because I think prior to that, the most we've ever seen was maybe 300,000. The number we really have to be scared of is 10.5 million vacancies in the United States, because the US are coming north of the border to fill those positions. So you're going to drive down through your neighborhood now, and I live in a beautiful neighborhood here, and I could drive down the road right now and I'll see all these houses with cars in their driveway and people working in their homes. And, not everyone who is working gainfully employed, although contributing to the local neighborhood, not all of them are actually now working for Canadian companies. So we're seeing that brain drain out of the country without even people literally leaving their house anymore. So we've lost over 1 million people in the workforce. We're going to continue to lose another 400,000 or 500,000 a year for the next 4 or 5 years. There's no good news. There's no end in sight when it comes to the shrinking demographics. And the countries that put people on the ground here, like China and India and a lot of those countries want their people back now. China would love to have their people back as they have their own aging population and their own crisis. And India would like to have their truck drivers back. So this is a problem that is significant, and it's the biggest problem that's going to face every single industry in the country over the next 4 or 5 years. And it's one that CEOs really have to start to address within their organization. And the big, couple big things that they really have to think about. One is their human resource kind of plan as they go forward. Banks are going to, and finances or financiers are going to start asking about that. And the other is, how do I build capacity in my business? And I think even some of the ways we record the success of our country and our numbers is in job creation. But I think it's really going to have to come down to more GDP and automation. And I don't think you're going to see programs for employers to hire people, because if you want a job in Canada right now, there's one available for you. I think you'll see money become available in grants and those types of things around automation, because it really is, how do I automate my business that I don't need as many people, because that's my biggest, kind of critical thing. So I throw all that out there. We want to have a little bit of discussion, but it gives you a bit of sense. I mean, the myth that there are people just sitting there waiting to come back to work is it's just not the case.
But how about all the international students coming to the country? They are young people. Definitely they're getting education in Canada, and a lot of them, they're going to go into workforce. I'm not an expert at China, but India, there's a lot of young talent there. They have a lot of young people. Their population is 55-60% is a young talent. And they all come into Canada, they all getting education here, and they eventually going to go to workforce. Definitely, there's barriers to some of the skill set they bring. Even though they have a technical skill set, that we still have to go through a lot of communication or soft skills. That's the challenge my industry faces eventually. But there's a lot of international students, even before COVID, even during the COVID, I think they were coming. Aren't they upsetting some of the baby boomers that, getting out of the market?
No, because even students that would be from another country that come to Canada and get their education, if they do decide to stay, they become part of that number, right? They become part of the 400,000 immigrants that moved into Canada. So you have two numbers replacing the baby boomers. One would be immigration, and the other would be young people entering the workforce themselves, right? Because the Z generation, which will come after the millennials, they're the ones entering the workforce now. They are a little bit of a baby boom in their own right, so they are half decent in numbers. The challenge is, if you think of how we got to where we are as a country, in 1935, there was only men working in Canada. Women were not, it was hardly even on the radar on how many women would have been in the workforce. When the war happened, women entered the workforce, then they exited the workforce again, and we had the baby boom population, which is actually one of the largest per capita baby boom populations in the world. So when the baby boomers got to about age 14 or 15 years old, women entered the workforce again. So we had women entering the workforce. So we went from single income families to double income families. That contributed to the GDP. And then we had this massive baby boom population that contributed to the GDP. Simply replacing baby boomers as they retire, even if it was possible, doesn't even make us equal in growth that we need in the country. In order to continue with growth and for businesses to continue to grow, that number has to increase. So we could absorb all of the students that are coming into Canada, and it still wouldn't be enough really to offset the baby boomers as they exit. And then, you can't deny the fact that baby boomers are very skilled as they're leaving, jacks of all trades, people that can do 3 or 4 different jobs and would need to be replaced with 2 or 3 people, not meaning that it takes 2 or 3 people to do their job. But say I'm retiring, one of my tasks that I do might go to Judy, and another one might go to Susan, and another one might go to Billy. So we don't have these jacks of all trades coming up through the ranks now that can replace this population as they exit. So and a lot of countries, even when they send their people here to be trained, they want them back after their education. And if they don't want, the US want them or somebody else wants them. And you did allude a little bit to something. We've created tremendous barriers around people entering the country using their own skill sets. But I mean, if you look at Canada as a whole, we create barriers from one province to the next.
Yeah.
I mean, a dental hygienist can't go and work in a province that's 20 kilometers away because they don't recognize their documentation. So we have a lot of fixing to do when it comes to immigration to be able to utilize the skills that are coming in. Or what'll happen, and you probably have friends that are immigrants. What'll happen is Canada will become a soft landing for other countries. People will come here, they'll use this time here to find themselves a position in the US or somewhere else where maybe they could utilize their skills. So it is a real challenge.
How does that impact the businesses, Eddie? The number I was watching with the RBC report a little while ago, 93% businesses in Canada are small businesses, right? So business owners in these companies, the 75 percent number, they said that, business owners are all above age 55 or 60. They are under the, baby boomer, the group we just mentioned. They're staying longer in a business to keep the business going, but they don't have anybody to replace them to keep the business going. So they could exit the business at one point.
That's right.
The young workforce there is not to, they have no interest in the businesses. A lot of business leaders I'm talking to, their families members don't have interest in a business. So how do they replace themselves? So isn't that creating a challenge for them? Their exit strategy is not going to be as easy as they expected.
100%. And it goes way beyond that. I'll give you an example. I mean, you probably have 100 of these yourselves. Obviously, I travel a lot as a speaker. So last week I was in Alberta for 10 days. I had multiple speeches in different cities, but I thought I would sneak up to Banff. Yeah. So I'm going to to Starbucks in Banff, and I don't know whether that Starbucks would have been a corporate store or a franchise store, but it's a beautiful location. It's one of my favorite Starbucks in all of Canada to go to. So my wife and I are in this lineup that literally is going out the door, and we see a seat available. So she runs and grabs a seat. I get the cup of coffee. It's about 5 minutes to 3 in the afternoon. We sit down, and this lady comes over to, and she said, "I apologize, but you're going to have to leave." And I'm like, "What? What do they do?" Right? And she said, she said, we only have enough staff to run a shift from 7:30 until 3 every day. And at 3:00, they sent everyone out of the store and closed it, including people that were lined up out to the sidewalk. But the challenge is, whether it's a business owner or, corporate store, the rent, all of the fixed costs, all of those things remain the same. All of the profitability just walked out the door. One of the big pizza giants in the US last week announced that their earnings were down. And it wasn't because the demand for the pizza wasn't there. It's because they didn't have any drivers to deliver the pizza to people's houses. Wow. So this challenge is significant. And, one time we competed for customers, but companies have to realize now the competition's for human resources, and the companies that get the people are going to get the customers, and that's going to be the reward. And I believe in my heart, and I spend a lot of time working with leaders. We've rewarded a lot of really bad managers in the past with success at the expense of the way they treated their employees. But the reality is now that we're going to start rewarding good managers with success and profitability and productivity and those kind of metrics, things that they can measure that we probably wouldn't have done in the past. So, I think there's great opportunity for people that are worth their salt as a manager or leader or have good leaders in their company. But I think it's payback for people who have not been good leaders.
Yeah. And other side of that is we with the shortage of skill set in a market, Eddie, is there's so much desperation to hire people. But if you take a junior staff and definitely you can find enough and turn them into manager. Can you imagine the decision process that these very, very junior skill set people gonna make in a businesses? Because they got a bigger portfolio that they should have based on what's not available out there, right? That has an impact on a business as well when you promote people with and that will go back to the same thing. If you turn these people into managers and leaders without having the groundwork is done to develop them as a person.
Yeah, no, I agree 100% on that. I think that, promoting people before they should, if you look at that whole emotional intelligence part of it, you get kind of promoted beyond your competency level. I can really see that happening, but I think even more what you're going to see as have a real negative impact would be the impact on wages. What we're paying people for current positions, and I'll give you some examples. Say you run a little consulting business or an accounting firm or a law practice or something like that, and you're billing your services out at, I don't know, $100 an hour, just to make the number easy. Mm-hmm. And you're paying someone $65,000 a year. So you're hiring someone, you're paying them $65,000 a year, and you're billing them out at $100 an hour. The real challenge is going to be when people from other countries or other regions start poaching employees in areas where they can't demand that kind of, so for example, I'm in Atlantic Canada. Yeah. We can't demand to our clients the kind of hourly billable rates that maybe you could in a place like Ontario or maybe Vancouver or Edmonton or Calgary, one of those larger centers. So the only protection we ever had in the past was that people who wanted to live in our region, we paid them less, but there was a trade-off for them to have this lifestyle and see their kids play hockey and all of that kind of things. Mm-hmm. But the challenge now is when somebody from another region comes in and poaches an employee, but lets them stay in their house, work remotely, and they could pay them much more because they're not billing them at $100 an hour. They're billing them at $150 or $200, or maybe in New York City at $400 an hour, or in Silicon Valley at $700 an hour. That's the challenge. So what I'm seeing from the CEOs and leaders that we work with across the country is ridiculous offers to some of their employees from people in completely different countries that have way more money to throw at the employee side of it. So I think that's the real big problem.
Mm-hmm. Creates a challenge for business owners, right? They still have to provide us services with the similar costs, considering an inflation and providing the similar services, and now the cost of the staff's going up. So how do they handle this? Eddie, how do they get a handle on this and still stay competitive and provide services?
Well, that's a good question. And a focus of mine since 2005 has been everything around employee engagement. So we really measure engagement, what it means into an organization. So I'm going to use Gallup's terminology, but anyone who's watching this, they could be using Hewitt's Best Place to Work or Blessings White or any of the other engagement. I mean, they could be using their own because SurveyMonkey has an employee engagement survey in it. Yeah. But Gallup divides it in three. Everyone divides it in three. And Gallup will tell you that about 59% of the workforce are not engaged. 27% of the workforce are engaged. They're your rock stars. They're the ones that, everyone knows who they are. They know who their best employees are. And then we've got this 14% of the workforce that are actively disengaged or destructive in your organization. So if you look at it from a payroll perspective, your most engaged employees, your 27%, you get 90 cents in the dollar. That's the best you're going to get out of a human being. That means they might take the odd sick day. They might come in late now and again or something like that, but they're really, really hard workers. But the value that you're getting, it far exceeds what you're paying them. So from a productivity perspective, the value is now this is key, because the big buzzword you're going to really start to hear, and even banks are going to ask for this, it's all about capacity building. How do I build more capacity into my existing organization? Yeah. So take that second group, the 59%, the not engaged employees. Now, they're great people. They do an honest day's work. They come in, they're really the ones that are keeping the lights on for you, but they're not your rock stars. They're not knocking it out of the park. So from a payroll perspective, you're getting 70 cents in the dollar. That means they take a little bit more time off. They come in late, go home early a little bit more gossiping at work. And productivity-wise, they're not as productive in the organization. So the value for that employee is not the same. Yeah. And then if you get that actively disengaged employees, you're getting 50 cents in the dollar. So from a payroll perspective, you're not, kind of getting as much productivity out of them. Go back to your number one group, that 27%, they do 60% of the total productivity in the workforce. That second group, the 59%, they also do 60% productivity. Now, anyone who's good at math would be sitting there thinking, well, that's impossible. But that actively disengaged do negative 20% productivity.
Okay.
So there's a group of people that tear your business down every day. And then there's a group of people that build it up. And then there's a group of people that are in the middle. What you really have to be doing right now is looking at the group in the middle, that 59%, and figure out, how do I shift more of those into the engaged group, where I'm getting 90 cents in the dollar from a payroll perspective, and move them into the 60% productivity rate within the organization. That's where the magic is. And that's called just moving into discretionary effort, where people do work in a company that truly makes a difference. But here's what you really want to think about for that. The 27% of the workforce, traditionally, 15% of those would consider leaving you. So they're kind of there to stay. Now, I say it with a grain of salt because we are seeing ridiculous offers right now to employees in that group. The 59%, which are good people, they just haven't found the groove in your business. Someone else could hire them and they could find the groove in their business and become part of their rock stars. That group there, traditionally about 55% of them would consider leaving you. The most current number on that is 85% of them are actively looking for another job right now. So we have this, and that's why in the US, they have what they call the Great Resignation, and we don't. What we're seeing is movement in that group, people jumping around, taking another 10,000 to go here, another $2 an hour, and moving in that 59%, trying to find their dream job. That actively disengaged, which you probably should have fired, they're staying. They're happy to be unhappy, and they're just there to make your life miserable. So they're, there's not. Unfortunately, they're the ones you kind of wish would leave, but they're sticking around anyway. And we have tools we can use with that group, but the key here is leaders and managers really have to be focusing on that 59%. They make up the majority of the workforce, and pushing them up into that engaged organization or engaged part of the organization. That's where the real benefit will happen.
And that's where a lot of coaching, a lot of, I think, leaders have to get in, and they have to train these people, coach it. But wouldn't you say that other focus, if you focus on the 27%, you mentioned that disengaged, wouldn't it make sense to replace that work, figure out how are you gonna either deal with that or bring those 59% into that and replace that 27%? Wouldn't that make sense?
So you mean the 14%, the actively disengaged, replace the 14%. So here's the question I ask an audience every time I'm standing in front of them. Okay. Because if I'm standing there and I say, you have this group of people, you're getting 50 cents in the dollar, and they do negative 20% productivity, and they take every hunting season off like it's a sense of entitlement. They take sick days like it's vacation days. When I say that to an audience, inevitably I'll look at people, whisper to each other, and giggle. And the reason being is that people literally put a name on them. They'll go, oh my goodness, that's Jimmy at the office. Jimmy takes every hunting season off, and Susan takes every sick day like it's a vacation day. And I always ask an audience, I know there's 30 to 40% of the audience right now giggled. And that's because you know who the name of the person that's actively disengaged in your organization. So if you know them, why are they still there? And that's a very valid question, right? If you know someone's tearing your business down, you're getting 20 cents in the dollar, negative 20% productivity and 50 cents in the dollar. So I hear all the answers. But here's some of the reasons why they're still there. It's very expensive to terminate people. So sometimes it's, in public sector, if they're close to retirement, close to, other than some kind of criminal activity, it's pretty hard to get someone out of your organization, even if they're the most negative there. Right now, it's getting so difficult to find people. Sometimes the fact that you have somebody sitting in a seat, at least they're occupying a space, and you can open the door in the morning and let the customers in. But I'll tell you one that we have a lot, and I know that some of your listeners, especially small businesses, sometimes they literally own the business. Sometimes the worst people, the most negative in a company, are the owners of the company. And it doesn't necessarily mean that the true leaders or the CEO, but it could be siblings, it could be cousins, depending on the size of the company. Maybe you inherited the business from your parents and you really dislike it, and you just can't hide the fact that you're not happy when you go to work. So what I always tell businesses, that 14%, that actively disengaged, they're kind of there. What you really want to do is create strategies to nurture the 27% and get more people to join the ranks and just kind of protect everyone from that negative group that's in your organization. And you have to realize that 59%, your everyday employees that are, just putting a day's work in, there are two people that are recruiting them right now. obviously all of your competitors are recruiting them. And the other is that troublemaker in the corner is also recruiting them, trying to join the ranks of the unhappy. And they have tools they use too, like gossip and negative comments.
Trying to bring it down. Trying to
drag you in, right? To drag you into the corner. So, just a good leader, minimize the damage. Don't focus on it. The worst thing you could possibly do is, like we had people that when they went working from home, they felt that people were home gaming. So they said, well, we're going to monitor keystrokes. So they started monitoring keystrokes of their employees that were sitting at home, but they're 27%, they're rock stars are like, if you're going to monitor my keystrokes, I'll do work the rule and I'll give you the 8 hours a day, but I'm not giving you a minute extra. Mm-hmm. So you want to be very careful on policies you put in place for your worst employees that you're not impacting your best employees. Deal with them on their own. Mm-hmm. And I always say good, strong leaders will deal with them on a one-to-one basis. Don't bring everyone else in the company into that, if that makes sense for you.
Yeah, no, definitely. And how about focusing on the top performer, Eddie? How about using that energy? I know that the bottom layer is trying to bring other, your middle people down, but how about using that energy from the top performer? Hey, this is where we're moving. Let's focus on this and focus on that and run your rock stars and pull everybody with them. See how high you can pull those people up.
Yeah, 100%. I think of it like dropping a pebble in the water and watching the waves go out. What you really want to do is get the people closest to your way of thinking, get them on board for new policies, procedures, things you're doing in the organization, and let that wave go out and pull people in. And you're going to pull in from that 59%. And that, will be the kind of real upside is focus on the best, get them to pull people in. And, if I was to show this to you on a slide, you'd almost see this like a slide rule, your rock stars at one end and your troublemakers at the other. And it's not like everyone's in a neat little bucket. The 27% are all doing 60% productivity. We're all over the map. Even the ones in the middle, some of them could be on the cusp of being a rock star. Some of them could be on the cusp of being a troublemaker. Mm-hmm. So it's always, how am I moving that group up, and that becomes the key.
Mm-hmm. Very interesting. So how big a challenge is for business leaders, Eddie? We definitely got to, deal with this problem. I know we just talked about in a workplace and dealing with the people, but we also got to scale companies. We definitely need to get back to where we, pre-COVID or whatever we were doing before and focus on that growth. So on a leadership standpoint, how big is the challenge and what are your thoughts on what can they do to prepare themselves and push themselves forward with dealing with these challenges?
Well, it's probably this. I think there's two major disruptors in the workplace right now. Well, probably three. Yeah. One is the skill shortage is massive right now, and if you're not paying attention to it, your business could crumble below you. So I think that you really have to focus your attention on that. I think the other major disruptor in the workplace right now is 5 generations working together. We've never experienced anything like that. So if you even from a communication perspective. And I believe that the pandemic has had an impact that accelerated something that was going to happen 6 or 7 years down the road, and it's happening right now. And I'll tell you, from my experience, and I've been traveling a lot since November and talking with CEOs, different parts of Canada are reacting very different to this. The reaction in Ontario would be very different than what I'm feeling maybe in other parts of Canada. But right now, Gallup just recently did a poll, and they said that 50% of the workforce are working full-time back at their offices. 50% of the workforce are either working in a hybrid work environment or 100% working from home. I mean, these are very, very significant numbers. So what was probably going to happen is we were probably going to get there anyway. Mm-hmm. And I think the aging population and the shrinking workforce was coming our way. I think the pandemic and the impact on immigration had such a big impact. And plus our buying patterns have changed. We're buying more online. We're getting more comfortable online. So we did this massive global kind of experiment. Could we work from home? I mean, look at me. I'm working, I got fiber connections, a studio, like the things that I never had prior to, I didn't even know what Zoom was prior to March of 2020, right? I do Zoom meetings all over the world now. So we were going to get there, but I think what companies really have to if we look at successful attributes of key leadership right now in Canada, we look at the top kind of 2 or 3 items. Number one is lead with empathy.
Mm-hmm.
So what do I mean by that? Well, I'm 60 years old. When the pandemic hit, I lived in a fairly luxurious lifestyle. I traveled a lot. I have a beautiful home. I already had fiber coming into my home. I already had unbelievable technology because I've been working from home for years, but traveling, right?
Yeah.
So I have to be empathetic to the young family that at 27 years old were sent home, and the company, all they gave them was a laptop. And they're sitting in the corner of the kitchen on a card table and competing with a Wi-Fi connection and trying to educate their children and compete with their spouse in that same environment.
Mm-hmm.
So leaders have to be very empathetic to the needs of their employees right now. Kawasaki in the US have started a new shift in a 10 o'clock shift till a 2 o'clock shift. They're paying $19 an hour. It was on the news the other night. I was watching it. Okay. And they said they're targeting specifically parents who want to be with their children, drop them off at school, work while the kids are in school, and pick them up at school. And they said it's been one of their most productive groups they've ever hired. And they focused mostly on the hospitality industry to bring them in. And they're paying them significantly more than the hospitality industry. So even though they're working a small shift, they're almost making as much money as they were full-time in the hospitality trade. So having that empathetic approach to leadership, I think, is one of the key attributes. And the next one, I think, would be flexibility. That you're very flexible. So the tolerance for people working in a remote environment is very different, again, in Ontario than it would be in rural areas or, kind of east or west in the country. So, but I think even those leaders have to become more flexible to what the workforce might look like in the future. And I'll tell you why, because I talk to leaders all the time and they'll tell me, oh, my people love coming to work. They don't want to work at home. 100%. I agree with that. There are a group of people that love coming to work every day, but if you simply look at the numbers, 50% of the workforce have come back to work, 50% haven't. And a lot of those 50% never want to come back to work. So if you're only playing in a pool of 50% of employees in a shrinking workforce, you're really playing a very dangerous game. You have to be open to the possibility that, obviously the person who turns the wrench in your business or drives the bus or the taxi or whatever, they have to come to work, but doesn't mean your accountant does or that you could be selling more online, like those kinds of things. So you really have to be looking different when you're looking into the future right now.
So that's a very interesting point, Eddie. You mentioned, we mentioned the Zoom, you mentioned technology and looking for opportunities, whether remote. If you're exploring opportunities, to the earlier point that we have a shortage of workforce, wouldn't it, I know other countries can recruit people from Canada. We're talking about US, they taking it. How about Canada? Don't we have opportunity to recruit from other countries as well? If somebody has to work remotely, why not have does it really matter the person sitting in a province in Canada or they're sitting in a different country as well, right? Can we complement that to the workforce to fill up the gap in a workplace?
100%. My daughter is a recruiter and she's a rock star in the recruitment industry. And she was going to recruit, and I think the number was like 150 employees in the Halifax market, a very technical piece of software they use mostly in the financial services industry. Yeah. But over the pandemic, they actually landed a bunch of clients, and now she's recruiting 300 plus people but she told me in a conversation we just recently, she said, Dad, I really don't care where they live anymore. She said they can be in Brazil or Bangladesh or the United States. She said, as long as they have a strong internet connection, they have the right educational background, she said, we'll hire them. But the flip side of that is everyone's doing the same. And I'll give you an example. And this happened with an Edmonton leader that I had spoken with. He was saying that they had found a very unique technical skill that they were looking for. And it was in Australia. They were completely comfortable with, having someone work remotely. And I think about like kind of whack-a-mole, that game when people pop their head up. So what tends to happen right now is if an employee pops their head up and says they're maybe interested in looking for work, the headhunters descend on them. And I'll tell you how many. There are 14,000 vacancies in Canada right now for headhunters. And that's companies hiring people to go steal your employees. And the reason why that's happening is if you want someone now, you have to go get them. You're not going to run an ad on LinkedIn or Indeed, and you're going to get the bottom of the barrel. If you need someone, you got to go get them. So this company found this person. They offered them significantly more than they were currently making in Australia. Work remotely, stay there. Mm-hmm. And what happened was the person ghosted them. And they gave the offer and nothing. And finally, they reached out to them and said, like, what's going on? And he said, look, I apologize, but I was offered something else. And there's just no way you could have matched it. And I was just embarrassed to call you. And they said, well, you didn't even give us a chance. And he said, well, I'll tell you what the offer was. He said, they offered me $100,000 more than you offered me. They offered me $100,000 signing bonus, and they offered me $700,000 in stock options. Could you have matched that? Mm-hmm. And they were like, no, I'm sorry, we couldn't. So even though we have the benefit of being able to recruit anywhere in the world, we are now competing against everyone else that's recruiting everywhere in the world as well. So what's good for the goose is good for the gander. In one sense it works for you, and then in the other sense it doesn't. So, but you're very valid. We can recruit anywhere in the world now.
Yeah. So opportunities is huge. If that's a business model, you can complement your workforce with the overseas workforce, and they have a skill set what you're looking for. Especially I see that in a software development, or anything could be done remotely. Labor intensive jobs, those could be easily outsourced to different countries, right?
But, one of the things Canada had to offer a lot of people, especially when it came to, technical immigrants or that would come in, was the lifestyle. A lot of people wanted to move to Canada because of the lifestyle. So I think when you go to somebody in India or Brazil or something and say, look, we'll hire you and you get to stay in your country, that isn't really what everyone wanted. Like a lot of people wanted that new experience to go to another country where there would be opportunities and different opportunities for wealth. So, in one sense it works, but in other sense, I worked for a large international company earlier in my career, and we had 14,000 employees in India. And it was one of the best employee base we had. We were a massive organization. So they were a call center. Mm-hmm. We literally had PhDs in this call center in India. So it was a great endeavor, but not everyone wants to stay in the country of origin. A lot of them want that experience to move somewhere else. And that was one of our big selling points in Canada, was this wonderful lifestyle.
Yeah. Definitely it works for some business. For my business, definitely doesn't work. What we simply try, our business is simply on a human interaction, building connection, building relationships. You can't do that remotely. But I understand certain business leaders are looking into it. It works for them. But, definitely you got to see, what your gap is and if you can fill the gap. Very interesting. I know we're running a little bit of time. Very interesting discussion, Eddie. We can go on, but let's talk about your book. If you walk us through, what is a book and what inspired you to write this book?
So, I'll give you 100 or 10,000 foot view of it. A few years ago, I wrote a book called Bring About What You Think About. And it's funny, they just polled a group of 8,000 meeting planners over the last little bit on what's an audience looking for this year. And they said inspiration. Yeah. So it's an inspirational book. And the reason why we're kind of looking for that right now is, the pandemic has really knocked it out of us. A lot of people, there's the stress levels and mental health, all of those types of things have had a big impact. So, I wrote this book a few years ago, didn't really realize it would become as successful as it is. It's a bestseller. It's sold literally all over the world, and it really tries to simplify that personal development, 3 easy steps to this level of success. Mm-hmm. And there's a key phrase in it. It's wherever you focus your attention and you put energy behind it, you bring more of that into your life. So, and that could be anything from your profitability numbers at work to weighing in the ideal weight to finding the perfect love in your life. And one of the things that robs us of success is our emotions. So, a lot of people are pretty good at setting goals, but then you have to match those goals with a set of emotions. And I think the impact of the pandemic has really hurt people from an emotional perspective. And that's why we see so much obesity and depression, and people can't hit their numbers at work. And so the book kind of fills that gap. So, I do this, I speak to this group of CEOs across Canada, and I literally do 2 talks for them. I do the whole skill shortage, and then we do a retreat. And the retreat, we do a bring about what you think about retreat for people that are looking for an edge. The one tool that everyone has that can really set you apart from everyone else is the power of your brain. And we don't use it. We don't harness it. Other people use it for their benefit. But if you can take control of your own thoughts and, where you're focusing your attention, and kind of, I call it more like creative or forward thinking, it's unbelievable what you can achieve. And it was very, very apparent during the pandemic. And I'll give you an example. 2 very similar companies, 2 sign companies, both of them shut down at the beginning of the pandemic. One of them goes, you know what? I could probably make face masks and shields and stickers and buttons and pins, and they open back up and have the best year ever. And the other one stays shut down. Both had the exact same opportunity, but one had a completely different thought pattern going into the pandemic. I talked to CEOs that have had their best years ever during the pandemic, and people in identical industries that have had their worst years ever. And the only thing that separates the 2 of them is what they're thinking. So that's really the premise of the book. 3 easy steps to setting goals that stick, 5 ways of accelerating success in your life. And the book is literally life-changing. And it's a ball to speak on it. It's a must read in a lot of organizations. We have a lot of clients that every time they hire a new employee, that's the book they give. So it literally was life-changing. I didn't expect it to be that big of a deal, but it was a life-changing book. A very different side of me from the employee attraction retention piece, for sure.
Yeah, that's very interesting. You mentioned that, because that's I've been working on a company. I've been building a company, and this is one of the probably the biggest challenge that I think business leader face. And while I face, definitely, the focus is one of the biggest things on spending time on yourself and controlling your thoughts. There's so much stuff happens during the day, and especially with the COVID, you keeping a focus and controlling your thought process has been challenged because you have so much time on your hand. I know a lot of other business leaders probably struggle through the same thing, because I've been struggling through it. I'm taking that they also dealt with it. But you're absolutely right. The gaining that focus and controlling your thoughts, when you have so much negativity in the media and around you, and you have events happening in the businesses, the people's health is on people dealing with health issues, your staff you're trying to help. So you're helping your staff all day, and which is all negative. You're trying to, and you still gotta control your thoughts. That's what the challenge is. I think you're dealing with a lot of negative stuff and in trying to help everybody else. And what happened to your own thought process, because that becomes a contaminator over time. It becomes negative. So I told I think that's a great retreat if you offer that to people, that helping them to gain the focus what they really need to build those companies.
Yeah, and there's some really simple tools that are in the book, but really simple life tools you can use to do that. The one that always comes to mind for me is gratitude. So I always think of your emotions on a scale. You're happy, passionate, excited at one end. That's where all the success happens. You literally attract success when you're passionate, on purpose, happy, in the zone. I mean, athletes have all kinds of words they use for it. Then at the other end of the spectrum, you have fear, anxiety, and stress in your life. We know the brain doesn't function as well. You literally don't even digest food as well when you have a lot of fear, anxiety, and stress. So I have a few little tools that I like to use to bring me up. And one is for me, I like to use gratitude. So I wear a little bracelet, and it's the little beaded bracelet. And if I'm sitting on a plane, I just kind of go through the beads and I think of the things that have happened to me that day that I'm grateful for. The flight attendant was super nice. I got to the front of the line. My luggage arrived when I got to Pearson Airport. Like simple things, but there's so many things happen to you in a day that are good, that we tend to only focus on the 2 or 3 things that were bad. And if you make gratitude part of your everyday life, then I'm always thinking, how do I pull myself up that scale so I'm happy, passionate, excited. You're going to have bad days. But for me, I'd rather have a bad 2 or 3 hours than a bad day. So are there tools that I can use to pull myself out of the funk? And for me, it allows me to be successful. And for the thousands of people that have read the book, that's one of the comments we get back from them, is that it allows them to be successful because they're in the right mindset to achieve that level of success.
Wow, love it. This is definitely, there's so much to so where can people find a book, Eddie? And also, is there a new schedule for a retreat? Where can people find the information? When is the next retreat? If you can share some information that business leaders were watching, definitely, I will recommend, hey, reach out to you, get a copy of your book, and I'm going to include your contact information below the video as well. I will recommend, hey, we are working on a business on a daily basis. So much goes on, and there's so many blind spots. That's where we need experts like you that, hey, listen, I can get there in about 2 months. Can you help me get there faster? Or can you give me more clarity that I can get there better conditions that I could be there by myself, right? So I will definitely recommend people to reach out to you, connect with you. So talk about your schedule for a retreat, if you have a schedule in place or something, people can look forward to.
So the majority of all the speaking I do, and I do about 75 events a year, are all private. They're mostly all done by clients who hire me to do events for them. During the pandemic, I started to do some virtual retreats that I would invite other people to. So if people are interested, to get added to that list to do a virtual retreat, especially on the book or even the other topic, we'll do both. But if you go to my website, it's eddielemoine.com, or just Google me, Eddie LeMoine, you'll find me. There's a ton of stuff out there. You can buy the book from my website or reach out to me. But I would love to chat with people if they are interested in doing something, but I love to chat with people just in general. So the more people that, would be interested in signing up on our list, we'd love to have you. So.
Yeah, I will include the link to below the video for all your website and your book as well. So definitely encourage people to go and reach out and connect with you. But we're great insights, Eddie. And I learned so much from our discussion, and I'm sure business leaders who connect with you, they can learn so much as well. But that's how we grow. That's how we we move businesses forward, right? So, hey, I know we're running a little bit out of time, but I really want to appreciate your time that you spend with me. I know I'll take a little more extra time that we talk about it, but thank you so much for time, Eddie.
Oh, it was my pleasure. I really enjoyed talking to you.
Yeah, likewise. It was a great discussion. I hope to talk soon.
All right. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay.